Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show today, I'm doing rock and metal from Australia. And I got my friend Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation here to join me. How you going, Peter?
Good. How are you, Steve?
Yeah, very good, very good. So I thought when I was thinking about, rock and metal bands from Australia, just profiling some bands that we know, like, or just feel like bands that need a little bit more attention. Of course, I thought about you. So, yeah, great to have you on.
Absolutely pleased to be on. And always good to talk about some rock and metal bands that maybe don't get enough spotlight.
Yeah, no, that's right. Well, of course, we're both down under. I'm in New Zealand, Peter's in Australia. So
Yep.
some of these bands are quite well known to us and well known maybe to people in our country because, Australia and New Zealand are fairly close. And sometimes if a band's popular in New Zealand, it can also translate over to Australia. And likewise, a band that's popular in Australia can sometimes come over and, be popular in New Zealand as well. But then it stops, like they don't make it in the States or UK or anywhere else. So, but it's up to you, Peter, and what you decided to choose. We're going to do five bands. Does that sound good with you? Five bands?
Yeah, yeah, and in no particular order.
Yeah, no.
So it's just
yeah,
five bands, and some just to let the viewers know, some of these bands are very regional, and may have only been in existence for a very short time frame, but they need to be spoken about, and this will be a gas.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, do you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to start off with the first band, and the band is Heaven. So this is the Twilight of Mischief album. So a little bit of background. Heaven formed in the 70s or the late 70s, and the lead singer, Alan Fryer, for a brief moment in time was in the frame to be the replacement singer for Bon Scott. He was that close. In fact, he was so close, the Adelaide News announced that Alan Fry had got the job. Even in reality, Brian Johnson had got the role. So he was laying down demo tracks with Vander and Young. Vander and Young was still in the wheelhouse of AC/DC, and Alan was singing demos, old Bond tracks, and he was right in it. So getting back to Heaven. Heaven, I would say, are meat and potatoes, hard rock, very much in that AC/DC sort of vein, and got that kind of Vander and Young sound. So when you're talking about hard rock and heavy metal, everything sort of comes back to the Vander and Young sound and comes back to AC/DC. So it's sort of like that's sort of the central band for everything. This album, Fantasy was probably the biggest hit. No One Knows, the ballad, Get a Move On, Suck City, very much AC/DC, power chords, sort of gravelly riffs. Now, Heaven actually, doing all the beer barns in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, going up and down the coast, they actually relocated to America, and for a period of time, they were a perennial support band and did support to bands like Judas Priest, Iron Maiden. Their second album, they had backup vocals of Glenn Hughes and Ronnie James Dio. So they were starting to get some traction, but it kind of, sort of petered out. But anyway, my first pick is Heaven, meat and potatoes, AC/DC, chunky rock, and the album that, everyone should do themselves a favor and check out is The Twilight of Mischief. And if you want to have that sort of, solid, no frills rock and roll. And Alan Fryer, he's a great vocalist and unfortunately no longer with us.
Oh,
are you familiar with Heaven?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, actually, I've got a couple of their albums, and actually, I think that album that you showed, there's another version that has a slightly different cover, and I think that's the one I might have.
Yeah,
and that might be the international version, and it's got a song on there called "In the Beginning" that I don't think's on that particular.
Where Angels Fear to Tread, which is their follow-up album. Yeah, I should have said that in the beginning. It's one of those songs that has a snippet of all the famous hard rock songs.
Yeah, it's a
Smoke
really good
on the
one.
Water, Whole Lot of Love. Yeah.
Yeah, I love
No,
that song.
that's a cracker of a song.
Yeah,
I saw them in the day a couple of times, and they never fail to disappoint.
yeah, yeah. No, great choice. Yeah. So if you haven't checked that band out, and yeah, an AC/DC fan, well, I mean, I'll be very surprised if you didn't know about them. But yeah, go check them out because yeah, very good. All right. Well, I'm gonna my band's just because you've started off with a band that I guess has similarities to AC/DC, and of course AC/DC, of course, from Australia. So I think it's okay a little bit, isn't it, if bands from Australia sound a little bit AC/DC because that AC/DC is an Australian band. So I'm going to go with a band called The Poor. So this came out in I think 1994, which yeah, it's like the worst time to be a hard rock heavy metal band, really. But these guys really surprised me because this is really good. Like you talked about before, Peter, with Heaven, like meat and potatoes, hard rock, heavy rock. Um, just you got to listen to just read the song titles. Dirty Money, Hair the Dog, More Wine, Waiter Please, which is a great song, one of my favorite songs off the album. But it's about drinking, having fun, partying, just with those really good rock and roll riffs that just get the party started, basically. Yeah, Aussie bands are kind of known for the pub rock kind of sound, and yeah, it's that heavy sort of pub rock sound. It's kind of surprising. Came out on a major label, Sony in '94, and yeah, it pretty much sunk, But I think they'd released an EP independently, prior to this. I don't know, but I'm imagining they were probably fairly popular in their local area, But
Yep.
but yeah, just never really took off. But
Never took off in New Zealand, right?
no, it didn't. I found this in
Yeah.
the bargain bins, and it was like, oh, give it a crack. Only probably
Yep.
cost me $1 or $2 or whatever.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
what is this? This is amazing. This is the kind of album I wanted AC/DC to be making in the '90s, and they kind of, for me, they kind of weren't. They weren't.
Yes.
Yeah, and but this is great. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that album went top 20, so they definitely had a little bit of traction and a little bit of spotlight on them. I know they used to tour with the Angels,
Yeah.
Angel City for our Northern Hemisphere folks, very much in that AC/DC vein, but maybe a little bit of Skid Row thrown in, a little bit of Metallic Edge, which was the kind of the contemporary type of hard rock that was going around at that time. Another band very similar to them that was getting a little bit of airplay and traction is a band called the Candy Harlots. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
Yes,
but I put those two in a very similar vein. But the Poor, I think, probably got the better of the commercial response with the audience. But yeah, that's a great pick.
Yeah, and you hardly ever hear them get talked about. So yeah,
No.
if you haven't checked them out, another good one to check out, definitely.
Absolutely. All right. Well, continuing with the Vanda Young and the Heaven, I would say that if you go to the next band in that sort of lineage, you'd have to talk a band called Boss and the album Step on It. So this band is very much continuing on the meat and potatoes work that Heaven laid down. Very much, they had a singer that sounded a little bit Robert Plant-like, Craig Soliardi. Maybe I got the pronunciation wrong. But they had a guitar hero in Kevin Pratt and some really, really solid songs. Dancing Queen, Hard and Fast, Escape, Take It or Leave It. Very much a solid meat and potatoes type of band. I'll just open up the album. Here we go.
Yeah, it's nice that one's got a gatefold. Yeah.
And I've got a bootleg CD. It never came out on CD. The only thing I can fault with that album is that production-wise, it's not so flash. And that's the problem with a lot of these middling sort of hard rock bands. They didn't have the budget that sort of would afford a top-notch production. It was on the RCA label. local label, which I don't think had a lot of idea how to market a hard rock or a heavy metal band.
Yeah.
But I used to follow this band all around the Sydney Traps. You know, if they played in one area, I would see this band about 3 or 4 times a week. I was following them and was quite obsessed with them in like around 1986. I love them. But this album, it has electronic drums. It doesn't have a real drummer, and that's kind of disappointing. So you can sort of tell, you know, that sort of 80s gated drum sound?
Yeah.
Well, they didn't actually have a live organic drummer laying down the tracks. They actually had electronic drums. So that's sort of like, that's a bit of a demerit. The band morphed into another band called BB Steel, and their first album was produced by Phil Collen of Def Leppard. And they were starting to get into the Def Leppard style of music, which was fine. But you know, if I wanted to compare bands, this is probably for me. It's like Led Zeppelin meets AC/DC with a bit of heaven. The album cover is not that great. I actually featured that on the Contrarians' bad heavy metal album covers, but you can't fault the music other than the drum track. And live, they were absolutely killer. And incidentally, Craig, the lead singer, was mooted as a replacement for Kevin DeBrow in Quiet Riot.
Really?
So he was one of the folk that was auditioning, but he didn't get the role. I think it went to Paul Shortino in the end. Anyway,
that's right. Yeah, hard to beat him. So that's not a bit, you know, losing out to him's nothing to be ashamed of. But yeah, okay. Oh, interesting. Yeah. So I showed the BB Steel. Now this is not one of my 5, but I was considering it, so I got it out. But yeah, I was aware of the link between the guitarist and the vocalist on here is the guitarist and the vocalist from that band. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And just to round it off and just talk about it, it didn't trouble the charts. And on a sort of international basis, they were like the perennial support band in Australia. Yeah. So when Dio would come out, they would be the support band. They would just they'd never sort of broke through to that headline status, which happens to a lot of bands.
Yeah. Yeah, we have the same thing here in New Zealand. You know, there's certain bands that for a while are there's a heavy metal band coming, right? It's this band's going to be the support band, and that lasts for a year or two. They either go off on their own and make it, or that's just another band comes along and takes that role. But yeah, cool. All right, nice one. So next one I'm going to go for is a band called Roxas. I'm sure you know about these guys. Yeah, I'm sure you know about these guys, Peter. Yeah, they were pretty popular, eh? Obviously, we're talking early. This is 1990, this live EP. You know, I'm not exactly sure. I think they formed in the sort of late 80s. Had a different name, I think, initially, but I think the vocalist is called Juno Roxas, I think, is his name. So they kind of get the name from that. Body Heat was one of the first singles. That's a really good song. It's a gatefold, this one, so you can see the band there. So very much a hair metal type look.
Didn't they have a hit single called "Where Are You Now" or "Where Are We Now"? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it was a hit. Yeah, maybe it was. But
yeah, it was a hit in Melbourne.
Yeah. I might even have. Oh yeah, here it is. I've even got a 45 of it. Yeah, there you go. Where Are You Now? Yeah.
I was almost there, folks.
Yeah, almost there. Well done, Peter. Yeah. So because their album, so they Night Street, I think, is the name of the album that they released. The album's, you can get it on vinyl, but it's like $1 million. So yeah, so I haven't got it, but I've got all their singles. So I'm really hoping eventually, because I do like the band and like the songs on vinyl. So yeah, hopefully at one point it'll get reissued, or I'll get very lucky and find it on vinyl. But yeah, so they only released the one album. Like I said, they've got this live EP. And they were very popular for a while there. You'd see them on Hey Hey Saturday. You know Hey Hey Saturday? That's
yes, I do. Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't even know. Did that go over there?
It did actually. Well, not. It didn't last for a long time, but in the early 90s, yeah, you'd be able to watch it on a Saturday night here in New Zealand. And Roxas were on it. I'm sure. I think
Mm.
so. Yeah, in fact, I think Molly Meldrum, Molly
Yeah.
Meldrum. I think he might have even had something to do with the band in a managing kind of role.
Yeah, I think they were on the Melodian album
Yeah,
label. So
yeah,
for folks, the big music guru
mm,
in Australia was Molly Meldrum, and he had
mm,
his fingertips on a lot of bands. He could actually make or break a band,
yeah,
and they
yeah,
were on his record label, and that did okay business. I don't think it was blockbuster business, but I saw them live, and
mm,
I would describe them as a little bit Bon Jovi.
yeah,
Definitely in that Bon Jovi, you've got a lead singer that's very good looking, bit of
mm,
a teen idol, but a little bit of crunch and metal for the blokes in
yeah,
the audience. And
yeah.
I saw them in Sydney at a place called the Cardoma Cafe, and they came on at 1:30 in the morning.
Wow.
That's what we used to do in the 80s, like where bands would come on at 1:30.
Yeah.
Now it's like if it's any later than 9:30, where are they? They did things differently then. But very melodic. I would say melodic AOR
Yeah.
Bon Jovi.
Yeah.
That's the ballpark, folks.
Yeah. And when that came out, when that EP came out and the singles were coming out in 1990, that was still okay. But I think Night Street, when it came out in 92, it was like, ooh, Nirvana's already out. It's not really such a big, popular sound. And that's pretty much the end. They did actually go off to America and start, they worked with a guy called Jeff Paris, and they started recording songs for a new album, but, it's just all unreleased because basically, post 92, that sort of sound was really not popular. So, but yeah, good band. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go a little bit obscure, and this is a little bit of a sort of a pet project of mine to talk about this band and more importantly, one of the guitarists. This is kind of a local band, and the band is called King's Cross.
Mm.
Okay. That's the album. Now, King's Cross was the brainchild of a guy called Jed McCormack, or as he was known, Jed Starr. Jed Starr is one of the best guitarists. He was a shredder. He was like a Steve Vai.
Mm.
So it was a band of brothers. You had Snuff, you had Jed, and you had Big Bird. These are all the nicknames of the band. They're the McCormack brothers. They were originally based in LA. They relocated over to Sydney, and they had two bands. One was called King's Cross, and the other band was called Massive Appendage, which were a speed death metal band. For reasons of censorship, I won't put the album cover up and talk about it. It's a little bit risque, and I don't want to offend your viewers, but they kind of rocked. So they had this alternative sort of universe, glam. They're
Yeah.
very all very glammy, and then they had the death metal. But Jed McCormack, or Jed Starr, was the star of that, pardon the pun, of the band, because he was
Mm.
just an outstanding guitarist. He was
Mm.
just so hot. And he got into another band called Killing Time, which had a
Oh,
little
yes.
bit of heat in Australia.
Yeah, I know them.
And
Yeah.
this is put a couple of albums out. They did a cover of Play That Funky Music. So they actually turned into, this is Ruby's Mind, but they actually, there he is, Jed
Yeah.
Starr, or Jed McCormack.
Mm.
And they actually changed their name from Killing Time into a band called Mantissa, which may
Mm.
be more familiar.
Mm.
Jed Starr did session work. He did guitar work for the lead singer, John Stevens,
Oh,
from
yeah.
Noisework, his solo album. And then he kind of disappeared.
Mm.
I know him. I know him from the metal scene.
Mm.
And the last time I saw and spoke to him was about 25 years ago or 30 years ago at a Annandale hotel. And it was a band called Horsehead, and we were just talking, shooting the breeze, and I've never seen
Mm.
him since. So
Mm.
where are you? Hopefully
Mm.
this video might bring him out, because he is such a talented musician, a
Mm.
great guitarist, and
Mm.
the metal scene was kind of electric around those two bands.
Mm.
So King's Cross and Massive Appendage, and this is the album I want to spotlight. King's Cross.
Well, I've never heard of that before. Someone in like a glam metal band and also in a death metal band at the same time. Is that right? Pretty much.
Yeah, same, and exactly the same lineup, and they just would switch it. They switch it around, and great musicians. But all of their lyrics were very tongue in cheek. Yeah. So, how would I describe Massive Appendage? Do you remember a metal band called SOD, Stormtroopers of Death?
Yeah, sure.
Very much in that vein. Right. Very jokey.
Yeah.
Politically incorrect. As I said, I can't really talk about it on the show.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, I understand. And the King's Cross, were they taking their sort of hard rock or glam metal sound seriously? Was that a bit Steel Panther or something as well?
A little bit.
Yeah.
It was tongue in cheek, but it was very much, your Dokken, your Rat, and just really playing it up. Yeah, and live, they would put on a show, have the sequins and the balloons and the scarves like Aerosmith, and they just put on a real show. But the artistic nucleus of that band was Jed Starr. He was such a great guitarist, and Jed, hopefully maybe you'll see this video and just come on the surface. I would love to interview you, mate, because you're a stone cold star.
And is that, you showed that King's Cross album, is that like just super hard to find, or was it reissued?
It is incredibly hard to find, and it's on eBay for about a 3-figure sum. So I had to, yeah. But that's a little bit of a pet project. Bands that I saw in the day where they would put out limited pressings of vinyl. If it's a reasonable and it's not too above the odds, I will buy it. But that's a little bit of a pet project, just to keep it. It's more of a nostalgia thing for me. And you're probably the same, Steve. Bands that you've seen that are kind of obscure, they do a little bit of a fan club thing and sell, do a pressing of 200, but they're worth money because it's such a limited pressing.
That's right. Yeah. All right, nice one. All right, so my next one, not obscure at all. They actually were very successful. Internationally, not so much, but in Australia, huge. In fact, they went to #1. They're like platinum. They were popular here in New Zealand, but definitely big in Australia.
Can I guess it?
I
was going to say Baby
Yeah. I was trying to show it. Yeah. That's the one. Yeah, so
that's a great choice.
Yeah. Of course, Susie is the vocalist, so female fronted. She sounds great. Interesting thing about her is in the late 80s, she was on EMI and releasing some like pop singles in the UK before she formed Baby Animals. But yeah, this is really good. I mean, the band is great. I think I can understand why they were successful. The singles that they released, very catchy, but they rock, but you can imagine them being played on the radio as well. I mean, my favorite song is actually the last song on the album, Ain't Gonna Get. Ain't Gonna Get. It was a good song, which is one of their heavier songs. But yeah, really good. Like I said, it was super successful. Even here in New Zealand, it got radio airplay and was on the charts. I don't think it really translated over to other countries so much. But they did release Shaved and Dangerous. That was their second album.
That didn't do so well.
No, and then I think that might have gone like gold in Australia or something like that. But that's, after the massive success, that was probably a big disappointment. That was 94. And then I guess after the lack of success with that and the way the musical landscape was at the time, they just decided to call it quits. And Susie married Nuno from Extreme for a little bit. They separated, and then they did get back together. I think around 2006, something like that. They reformed and they put out like an acoustic album, and then they did some touring, and then they did put out a new album. But then it's basically Susie and 3 different members. So not the three guys from this first album and the second album. But
so no Dave in the band, or
no, that's what I understand. Dave Leslie,
no Dave Leslie,
Look,
that's a great choice. I've always regarded Susie as being Australia's answer to Pat Benatar, very much. I mean, the early Pat Benatar, not the pop Benatar.
Yeah, yeah.
That first album's solid. I saw them in the day. They're very they're a solid rock band.
Yeah.
Great live. But yeah, that first album did phenomenal business in Australia. But the second album, it's the old sophomore syndrome.
Yeah.
It tanked and didn't do so well, and probably wasn't as good. And
I don't think it is. No, I don't mind it. There's a couple of good songs on it, but it doesn't have. This is, start to finish. It's good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, no problem. Now going more in, continuing in obscurity. I'm talking about an Australian band or a Sydney band that was briefly a bit of a flag bearer of power metal in 1984, probably before my time, before I was seeing live bands. And this band is called Surrender. So this is a bit of an obscurity. The lead singer, Dave Compton, has a great set of pipes, and that's the band. And I would describe them as parts Iron Maiden, Dio, power metal, a little bit of Rainbow. Now, Dave Compton he's kind of a stalwart of the the Aussie metal scene or the Sydney metal scene. He's been in bands like Godspeed, Infurium, and the last time I saw him, he was in a tribute to Rainbow. But this band, this particular band, Surrender, is a really, really solid album. It's nicely produced. It's on a sort of a shoestring budget, but if you like your Iron Maiden, you like a little bit of Rainbow, and you like that Dio operatic flourish, that's the band for you. And you can't really get this album. It's just a bit of a rarity. So look it up on Discogs. I think it was a limited press, but the album is there to be heard on YouTube. So I'll encourage your viewers to check it out and give it a listen. It's an obscurity, but I want to give it a shout out because Dave Compton has got a great set of pipes, and this band should have been much bigger. So there you go, Surrender from 1984. I never got to see them, because they were in 1984. I got out into the gig world around 85, 86. So they were just before me. But they were sort of definitely waving the flag.
Oh, I'll definitely check that one out. I haven't heard it at all. So yeah, nice one. Did you find out about them later on, sort of thing? Did you? Sort of.
I always knew about them in the day in the metal scene, so they were sort of talked about.
Yeah, sure.
A girl that I was dating at a particular time in the late 80s, she really used to love that band, and I think she knew some people in the periphery of that band. And this is actually her record. I've still got it.
Well, if she's watching, she knows where to find it, eh?
You're not getting it back. It's mine. But it plays really well, and I looked at it and it's worth a little bit. But really, really good, solid album. Yeah,
cool, nice one. Yeah, no, I like the obscure ones. That's really good. So check them out if you like the way Peter's describing it. So I definitely will.
Surrender, self-titled.
Okay, 1984, right?
Yep.
Cool. All right, so I'm going to sort of move into sort of for my last two bands, I'm going to move into sort of the early 2000s, late 90s type bands, and I'm going to go first up with a band that I actually heard about when I was living in Australia for a very brief time. For about 6 months, I was living in Sydney, and I saw this CD in one of the music shops, and it's a band called The Butterfly Effect. And this is one of their first singles, Crave, but then they released an EP. Take It Away, I think, might have been actually the first single I saw, the music video. And then this was their first full length, Begins Here. And then they've got probably my favorite one, Imago. And then their last, well, it's not actually their last one, Final Conversation of Kings. This is their third album. And then they've just released their fourth album last year. They, one of those bands that they had a bit of success, put out 3 albums, and then they broke up, and then they got back together again recently, and they've been touring. They've, so they have just released their fourth album. But yeah, it's sort of like modern rock, alternative metal, even a little bit progressive, especially on the Final Conversation of Kings, a little bit more prog rock on this one. But yeah, really good band. I really like. I think the vocalist is really good. Clint, I think his name is. But really tight band, and never got to see them. They did tour New Zealand once, and I had a commitment that I couldn't get out of, so I was really annoyed I missed it. But yeah, do you know about them, Peter?
No, I'm not. I think I've heard the name,
Yeah.
but I'm not familiar with their material. But
Yeah.
weren't you on a show that we did on my channel that I think you might have raised that was one of your favorite songs of 1992, 93?
I may have talked about them. I don't know
Yeah.
if it's on your show, but I really like them, and they're not like Baby Animals who broke big time, but they definitely have they're a decent fan base. I mean, they did, you got 3 albums. They released on Roadshow Music, which is a fairly biggish label. Well, with Sony as well. And they had that sound that at that time in those early 2000s was kind of popular. But yeah, no, I just think worth checking out if you like that type of sound. They did it really well, and like I said, really good musicians. I really would have liked to have seen them live, so I was a bit disappointed I haven't. But again, they had they had a bit of infighting. They actually for one song, they put out one song with a different vocalist after the third album. They had a bust up, and they got a new singer in, but then they realized that it wasn't working out without the original singer, and now the original singer's back. But yeah,
and they're still going. They're still going strong.
Oh, so they are, and they released a new album last year, and I'm sure just have a look out for them, Peter, in the sort of festivals and stuff. I would imagine over the summer. I'd be surprised if they weren't playing in some festivals. Yeah.
Okay, absolutely. All righty. Well, for my last one, I'm going to go a little bit wild card. So I love hard rock, I love heavy metal, but I also love a lot of thrash death metal. So the band I'm going to pull out is kind of a little bit extreme. So there was a band. I'll briefly talk about some of the bands that were playing in Australia, and that'll lead into this choice. So there was a band called Mortal Sin.
I was just going to guess that. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So Mortal Sin got signed up to Vertigo Records, and they did a support tour to Metallica. There was a lot of heat with them. I used to see them a ton of times. They're great, but very much that sort of early Metallica sounding. I'm talking about Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning. They also toured Europe and supporting Anthrax, so they had a lot of heat. There was another band called Slaughter Lord, which were very much death metal. Very much, if you know those Scandinavian bands like Bathory, the Kraut death metal, like your Destruction and Creator. But I used to go to these gigs, and there was this guy called Dave Slade. And he's a very menacing sort of looking guy. And there was a lot of heat and a lot of word on the street about this band that he was putting together called Sadistic Execution. And they never played a gig. I never saw them in that era in 86. But they did put a record out, a CD, as he looks for it. Here it is. And this is the album, Sadistic Execution and the Magog. And that finally came out in 1986. And there they are. And I've only recently just purchased this, and this is like a rarity. They did a limited press. It's on CD, and here it is. This is quite a legendary death metal, thrash metal band. You listen to it, and a lot of it sounds it's got the gravelly sort of vocals that you would expect of a death metal band. But there is some musicology in there. There's a little bit of Slayer. There's a little bit of Bathory. It's quite an evil sounding album. And, I was just playing this recently ahead of this show, and I was just surprised how vibrant it sounds and groundbreaking for that particular year, 1986.
Mm,
Like Australian rock, I suppose it's similar to New Zealand, was absorbing a lot what that was overseas, and these guys are definitely sort of being influenced what was happening in the Scandinavian or the German sort of thrash or speed or
mm,
death metal movement, but putting in a bit of an Australian twist. So even though I never got to see them live, I was very familiar with some of the characters or some of
mm,
the band members, because they'd
mm,
be going to a lot of these gigs, and we'd be having a chat, and there was a lot of word of mouth about this particular project, and it came
mm,
out in spades. So if anyone could, if you like that sort of music, check it out. It's definitely very much, at the top of the game. You can
mm,
tell there's budget restrictions.
mm.
It doesn't have that sort of Rick Rubin, Rain and Blood sort of
Sure. Yeah,
production,
yeah,
but for what it does pretty effectively. So
yeah.
that's my choice, Sadistic Execution, for my fifth. I thought I'd just propose something a bit of a wild
Nice,
card here.
nice. And it's I've not heard it, but I definitely when you showed the cover and the name of the band definitely rings a bell. So I've probably seen it around, but yeah, I probably would have looked and thought, yeah, nah, probably just a little bit too heavy for me. But
Are
yeah.
you a fan of death metal, Steve? Do you
No,
like
not so
speed
much.
metal?
Not so much.
No.
I don't actually mind it. It's just not my go-to kind of thing,
Yeah.
So
Is it the vocals?
yeah, I think that probably is it. I think I don't mind the speed. I love, usually often I would love the riffs and the guitar
Mm.
playing. But I think part of it is being able to just the vocals, being able to actually hear the words and yeah.
Mm.
Even I find like with like I quite like a little bit of metalcore, but I usually like the chorus because usually they then go to a very sort of melodic chorus, and then
Mm.
and the verse is not so much when it's sort of a little bit more shouty and rough.
Yeah,
But certainly too, I think with the death metal when it sort of gets Cookie Monsterish, I don't. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It's just it just doesn't quite do it for me. But yeah,
absolutely. Anyway, I thought I'd just
yeah,
throw
no, that's
something
cool.
in just a little bit different.
Yeah, no, it's great. All right, so my last one, similar to the butterfly effect who I talked about last time. I think these guys, maybe you might know these guys. I think these guys were a little bit more popular. It's a band called Grinspoon. Does that ring a bell? Oh
Yes,
yes.
I do. Yeah, I know
Yeah,
them. They're very good.
yeah. So came out actually. They were out before the butterfly effect, sort of mid 90s, late 90s. And I'm actually not a massive fan of the band, but I do like their early stuff. So this is actually the Pushing Buttons EP, which is fantastic. It's got so many good songs on it. For me, their best song is More Than You Are. That is a great song. But it's also got Black Friday on here, which is good. And they cover the Prong song, Snap Your Finger, Snap Your Neck, which is, I really love that song. So, yeah, for me, this is kind of my go-to Grinspoon. I have heard their other albums and, have a couple, but they do change their sound a little bit too as they progress. And it's good, but it's not so metal. It's more just a sort of a rock. They're a bit of a sort of more maybe modern rock, alternative rock kind of sound.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, but and you've heard of them, Peter. So I can imagine that they didn't actually really break through that much here in New Zealand, but I did actually see them at the Big Day Out. Saw them in concert the Big Day Out. They were really good. I can't remember what year it was. It must have been maybe 2005, 7, something like that. But or maybe
Yeah,
2010. But
yeah.
yeah. Uh,
They probably didn't break through in New Zealand because you had a lot of bands that were like that, like
yeah,
LMNOP,
yeah,
around that
they
era, sort of
did.
the grungy, down tuning, the
Yeah.
alternative rock. I mean, there were so many New Zealand bands that were of that sort of type. Um, is there room
Well,
for
they
something
remind me
for
a little
Kate
bit of
or
they
Greenspan?
remind me of Shehad. They're like Australia's
Do you
version
need
of
it?
Shehad.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Spot on. Do you need
mm,
another Shehad? That's
yeah,
probably why they didn't. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, and then the vocalist I think had a bit of an issue with drugs there for a while, and
Yes, yes. he did
Supposedly
have.
he stole money from the band, and it was not good.
They're all good. They're all good now, and
mm.
they're doing a reunion gig.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Or not a reunion, but they're playing some shows. So I've just seen it come up on my feed. They're great
Yeah.
live.
Yeah, we're good.
They're tight. There's a little bit of stoner rock element in them, you know, a little bit of down tuning. But yeah, that's a good pick. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Oh, awesome. So there we go. 10 bands, and we didn't have a double up, so that was good. So I didn't have to bring up my sadistic execution.
Well,
no
look,
chance.
folks, there's some bands that you would never heard of, but you know, if I can put one or two people investigate some of this music because it's all brand new, might lead to other things.
Yeah.
Because we just don't want to. I mean, we could have spoken about bands like the Choir Boys, the Angels, which you know didn't break big worldwide, but
there's always this little band we could have talked about, eh?
Well, as I said at the start of the show, all roads lead to AC/DC, don't they?
Yeah. It's been awesome, Peter. Thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure.
I'm sure everyone watching's already checked it out, but if you haven't, make sure you go and check out Peter on Rock Daydream Nation. Fantastic channel. He does great discussions about a wide variety of rock and metal. So make sure you check that out. And make sure you hit the subscribe button for Rock and Metal Invasion. Hit the thumbs up. And leave some comments if you know about some of these bands or if you have checked them out. What do you think of them? I'd love to know. All right, thanks for watching. We'll catch you later. See ya.
See you later.